But today, Bloomberg News reported that Mueller is also preparing to accelerate, that's the word, his probe into possible collusion between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin, which is really the heart of the matter here. According to a person familiar with the investigation, Mueller and his team of prosecutors and investigators have an eye toward producing conclusions and possible indictments related to collusion by fall. Well, that's, of course, this September. NBC News has not independently verified that report. However, it comes after we learned last week of a third Trump campaign contact with a Russian offering dirt on Hillary Clinton, the same old pattern. All three of those overtures, by the way, occurred between late April and early June of 2016. That would be spring of 2016, before the public learned that the DNC had been hacked by Russian intelligence. Well, furthermore, there are now at least 13 Trump associates who are known to have had suspicious contacts with Russians. In his latest book, The Plot to Destroy a Democracy, MSNBC analyst Malcolm Nance, you know him well, writes, any final assessment by a trained intelligence professional would conclude that Trump was a spy's dream. That's his words in his book. However, the only person who knows whether there's hard evidence to prove Trump engaged in a conspiracy with Russia as of now is Robert Mueller, the man I call the iceberg. Joining me right now is the author of that book, Malcolm Nance, and Cynthia Axne is a former federal prosecutor. First of all, I want to go to you, Malcolm. You're the expert on this, but I won't. Cynthia knows prosecution very excellently. What's it mean when the word comes out, thanks to Bloomberg, that this prosecutor, Robert Mueller, has plans to move this thing, to skate it along, and perhaps come up with a report not just on obstruction sometime in the next several months, but by the end of the year, in the fall, a report on collusion with the Russians involving the Trump people?
Well, you know, it's been said by friends of Robert Mueller that his favorite hobby is putting people in prison. And I don't think that he's going to have a problem at all if he has the evidence to bring at least part of the conspiracy charges involving people having contacts with known intelligence officers together, and to be able to, at least in the first phase, go after people who were the initial dirty tricks teams who may have worked with Russia to support the Trump election. That will involve, of course, more indictments. We know Manafort's trial is coming up, and maybe he will turn. We don't know about that. But Robert Mueller is on if he's going to accelerate his schedule, that means we're going to have a wild summer and someone is going to go to jail. He's not going to allow that to lapse.
Well, Cynthia, one thing we know in the knowing world, maybe not counting Trump, in the knowing world, is that the Russians had an elaborate conspiracy to screw with our election in 2016. And it had so many points, so many, pieces to it, like an octopus. All these arms coming into everything, social media, election machinery, everything, people around Trump, people that were with Trump, people who have American-Russian sort of connections. All these efforts, and they have matched up, in many cases, as we said, with a lot of people who were reaching their arms out, too. To these squid-like arms coming out, then they were reaching and grabbing them and connecting with them.
Right. There's a Russian under every rock. I would agree with Malcolm that if something is going to happen before September, it's going to be sort of on the outside segments, because on the inside, the heart of it, we read this and we think, oh, boy, maybe there's something up with Don Jr. or Roger Stone or Kushner. And my experience would tell me that isn't coming before September, that it will be something more on the outside.
Roger Stone?
I don't know about Roger Stone. He hasn't been interviewed yet.
Rick Gates, Manafort?
Manafort, I'm surprised, hasn't flipped yet. He's sitting in the central jail in
Michael
Virginia.
Flynn. What? He's flipped.
He's flipped. And remember that Mueller has a lot of information from Flynn, and he has a lot of information already from Cohen, and it's only a matter of time before Cohen flips. And
because of the weight of 20 or 30 years he's looking at?
No, yeah, because of the weight, and because he had enough information to indict him at the time he did the search warrants, because the search warrant was so broad and he was such an important person that would have moved up the chain through justice, and that I would definitely say there's enough.
Have you been around long enough to know what the look of the eye in the eye is of a person about to flip? Hemingway, I've just been reading For Whom the Bell Tolls, and I take Hemingway very seriously, Malcolm, whether you do or not, sir, but I take him seriously. He talked in the Spanish Civil War. He said you could see in Pablo, one of his colleagues at arms, he saw the sadness in his eyes, and he said, this guy's going to flip. He's going to betray us, and he did.
What
I think he did. I haven't got to the end of the book yet, but I think he was going to flip.
What I see is a guy who had a very good congressional fixer lawyer and has now switched to a lawyer who specializes in the United States Attorney's Office in the Southern District. And I also see a guy who has all the incentive, and I see a guy who's been dissed and disrespected by the president. Yeah. That, to me, is a recipe for flipping. And to me, it's only a matter of time. But that's why I think we will not see the indictments before September, because there's too many little pieces to fall. And people who haven't been interviewed, that's what's really interesting for court watchers. Yeah. If you look at the investigation, some people haven't been interviewed, and those people have a problem.
Well, this comes amid new reports on the continued threat that Russia poses to our elections. The continued threat. Political reports, Republican and Democratic lawmakers say the Trump administration is keeping them in the dark about whether the U.S. is ready to deal with Russian interference in the coming midterms this November. By the way, the campaigns are underway. We're getting toward the election. Quote, a half dozen senior House and Senate lawmakers say they're hearing only an alarming silence from the administration about what Moscow's trolls and hackers are up to. Malcolm, that's a question for you. Do you think, what's your hearing on this? Are we trying to prevent this all from happening again in 18, which is now?
No, we're not trying to prevent it because, you know, we have one half of this nation has been told not to believe anything related to the hacking of the DNC, to have anything to do with Donald Trump and the Republican Party. They control the government, and they have convinced the people inside the government to do just the minimal things that they had been doing before. There was no moonshot here to defend American democracy. There was no effort whatsoever to defend this nation from another hacking. Now, maybe it's not a hacking in the sense of the DNC. Maybe it's individual emails like the Podesta campaign had occurred to them. But we might see a wave of compromise, of, compromising information intended to, blackmail or coerce people during the run-up to this campaign. That, the U.S. news media is the dagger at the throat for that, and I fully expect to see that happen in the run-up to the campaign.
Well, there's some cats on the hot tin roof here. You notice Roger Stone got a little skittish last week, and I'm wondering whether that, when he comes out and said, oh, yeah, I did have contact with the Russian, does that in any way indemnify him or protect him from prosecution to come out in public and say, okay, I'll admit it, before I get indicted, I did have something to do with the Russians? Malcolm,
no,
does that protect him?
No, I don't think that protects him at all. The funny thing about Roger Stone, I met Roger Stone last year, is that, everything that he said during the campaign was designed to puff him up, to make him look like the ultimate insider. I think there's a reason he hasn't been interviewed yet by the Mueller team. And he's already denying a lot of the stuff that he said, his contacts with WikiLeaks. He just doesn't want to be caught out as a con man. He just doesn't want to be caught out as a fraud.
I think he liked the tease. I think he likes the tease and the notoriety because it makes him into a very important figure in this Trump world. Nobody wants to be indicted.
Right, I mean, he basically went into the Congress and lied and said he hadn't had Russian contacts. And then when Mueller had the notes proving that he had that Russian meeting with a guy where they offered him dirt on Hillary Clinton, and he was just basically too cheap to pay for it. They wanted $2 million. Then he went in. Now he wants to, change his testimony. Well, that's not going to fool Bob Mueller.
Well, just remember, Saddam Hussein pretended he had WMD, and he didn't. Look what happened to him. Thank you, Malcolm Nance. Thank you, Cynthia Oxney.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.